I have heard a lot of people ask the question, how many genders are there? And there kind of is an answer. It's just simultaneously a little bit more simple and a little bit more complex than you might think. As humans, we like to categorize things. Often it serves to make our world easier to understand and interact with. But like my friend Luke says, this is a low resolution view of the universe. For example, let's think about colour. These are colours, red and blue. Now we usually know that red is red and blue is blue, and so on for the other colours, yellow, green, orange, pink, purple, and brown. But what happens when we increase the resolution? We zoom in and get to the bounds of those colours. Now things are a little bit more tricky. Is this blue or is it green? Even if you were to ask two people from the same place, speaking the same language, looking at the same colour on the same monitor from the same angle, in the exact same lighting conditions, you could get two different answers. There is definitely a point where green becomes blue, but where exactly is that? While as a group we may share the same general idea of what is green and what is blue, there are going to be some slight differences when it comes to individuals and their strict classifications for those colours. While things might seem clear-cut and distinct from one point of view, when we take the time to observe more closely, we start to notice complexity and ambiguity. And this is only taking into account one language. Let's look at Scottish Gaelic, for example. In Gaelic, instead of blue and green, you've got gorum and uinia. So while in English I might say this grass is green, in Gaelic I would say the grass is gorum. No, that wasn't a mistake, but I might have misled you just a little bit. While gorum and uinia map mostly onto blue and green respectively in English, it's not an exact match. Gorum doesn't just mean blue as we'd understand it in English, it also describes some greens. More specifically, the word encompasses anything from a dark blue to a dark green. Uinia then describes lighter, more yellowy greens, but the specifics here aren't actually that important. The thing to bear in mind is that the lines drawn between colours can not only vary from person to person, but can also vary much more markedly between different languages and cultures. If you speak Russian or Hebrew, you might have noticed that earlier I said pink and red and orange and brown, but I lumped these two colours under the name blue. And if you don't speak those two languages, or a handful of others, you might be wondering what on earth I'm talking about right now. The thing is that English doesn't differentiate between different shades of blue. I mean, of course we have different names for them, light blue and dark blue, but they're both certainly blue. That's just not the case in Russian, Hebrew, and a few other languages. They don't just have different words for these shades of blue, they're seen as different colours. Golden is no more sunny than pink is red, or orange is brown. I mean, we understand them to be different colours, but you take some red and you make it a little bit lighter. Or you take some orange and you make it a little bit darker. Well then. So, are they one and the same? Well, that depends on language and culture. And you gotta remember that colour is just an experience created by our brains, based on how different wavelengths of light excite the cone cells in our eyes. The wavelengths that trigger this experience we've labelled as visible light. But this fuzzy categorization extends to the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Visible light is just the stuff that we can see, but then you've got infrared radiation, and you've got microwaves, and radio waves. Do you think we decided on the cutoffs for these names because that's exactly where the properties and behaviour of these wavelengths change drastically? Or do you think we noticed general trends, and we made categories that are broad and get a little bit fuzzy at the edges? Ultimately, when people make jokes about there being too many genders, I think it's pretty small-minded. And I don't mean in the sense that it's bigotry towards trans people. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is definitely bigotry towards trans people. I just mean more like... Wow, you genuinely think there being 73 genders is sillier than there only being 2? 2 is kinda an arbitrary number based on a very simplified view. When we say that gender is a social construct, that doesn't mean that it's not real. It's kinda the same as when I say that colour is an experience created by your brain and not an inherent property of the universe. Sure, it's based on the wavelength of light, but it's only based on that. So yeah, we can say there are 2 genders, we can say there are 3. We can say there are as many as we like. We can come up with as many categories as we want, and we'll still never quite have it right. Because every individual person has their own experience of gender. Even if a person had the exact same feelings or experiences as someone else, they could each interpret that slightly differently. For example, someone could label their experience as non-binary, while someone else with the exact same experience could be perfectly comfortable labeling themselves as a binary man. Strictly speaking, there are as many genders as there are people. But that is unwieldy. That is too many. We don't even have unique names for every individual person on the planet. So we use labels based on shared experience. We lump people into groups. We do all of this to make it easier to categorize people. Categories are useful, but you need to remember that often they're not objective representations of reality. They're just something we've made up for ease of understanding. They should be used descriptively, not prescriptively. We can use the categories of gender to help us describe what we see and feel and experience, but not to define it. So, how many genders are there? Well, how many colors are there? Depends on how specific you want to be. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know whether you thought this colour was blue or green in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking or subscribing. It really helps. And speaking of really helping, you could join my Patreon. If you really like the stuff that I make, you could get lots of bonus videos every month. You could get live streams. You get to see videos early. All my patrons got to watch this video about a week early at least. You can also have your name here next to me while I'm finishing the video. Look, your name could be there if you join my Patreon. And I would also like to give a very special thank you to Rachie May, Sarah, and Renegade. I really enjoyed making this video, and it would mean a lot to me if you shared it on social media. All of the links to mine are in the description. You could also join my Discord or check out my merch there. I think I'm done. That is everything. Goodbye.